class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Let's start off first foremost. The casket of fallen Capitol Police Officer William Billy Evans arrived in the Capitol Rotunda. The president there to give words to the family of comfort. These are the moments that Joe Biden, you go, this is why I'm happy Joe Biden is in the White House. Wasn't an embarrassment, wasn't about him at all. It was about comforting the family, which he did. He said, look, you're going to hold each other, you're going to get through this. And on the other side of it, you're going to know that he's still with you. He's still in your heart. Wasn't chaotic. And I looked at it and horrible tragedy. And talking about the time that we're in. I saw it and it's just heartbreaking. But I wanted to make sure we got to that. Also. The prosecution has wrapped up its case in the Derek Chauvin trial. 38 witnesses, 11 days to basically watch a 9-minute and 29-second video of this police officer with his knee in the man's back and watching him die right before your eyes. It took 38 witnesses and 11 days to do that. The defense, they began right as you knew they were going to. It wasn't the police officer's fault. No, wasn't Derek Chauvin's fault. It was because Floyd had health problems. He was on drugs, drug addict. It was anything other than the 9 minutes and 29 seconds that the man's knee was in his neck. They did everything they could do to say, oh, it was this horrible thing. A year before he was arrested on drug charges, had high blood pressure. That's the only thing they've got, to be honest. And you got to put up a defense, and that's all they've got. The hope is the jury doesn't buy it. But I did find interesting, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because it's just disgusting to me. It's disgraceful. But there was a former police officer, an expert in use of force. Okay. A guy named Barry Broad, he testified that he felt what Derek Chauvin did was justified. He was acting with objective reasonableness, his words, not mine, that he was following the Minneapolis Police Department's policies, even though he wasn't sure what they were, and current standards for law enforcement in his interactions with Mr. Floyd. I'm struggling with that one, as was the prosecution. He went on to basically contradict everything that the prosecution's policing experts had to say, and the Minneapolis police chief, who said that there was no way, shape, or form, did Chauvin act within the department policy, training, ethics, or values. So it's going to be interesting to see how the verdict turns out as we see more of this kind of, it was because of the health, it was because of the drug, the conspiracy, he had chiclets or something. And this police use of force expert said that it didn't matter that Floyd was already handcuffed, that he shouldn't have been resisting, and that anybody who was handcuffed and in that position, they would be, on the ground in a prone position, and that their hands would be resting on their back, and they wouldn't be moving around. Which you watch this horrible video, and you go, he's not moving around. Everybody who was watching it saying, not moving around. Now, that was also part of the testimony, that everyone around them was excited, and there was, screaming, and there was carrying on. So clearly, this was, we couldn't make the right judgment. Now understand, this is where we give police officers a lot of responsibility. We give them a lot of leeway. This is where they need to be held accountable for all of the training that they get to deal with these situations. He was under control. I don't see any And I don't buy the argument that he was distracted, that he was. I don't buy that. I don't buy this guy's argument that they couldn't roll him onto his side, as supposedly is the procedure when you have someone who's either on something or completely out of their mind, because you need to breathe. The argument was they couldn't roll him on his side or on his back because he was in the middle of the street. And I'm going, but the police had the whole street basically blocked off. And they can do that. They're the police. They block it off for any other reason. You mean can't do it here? So I'm over the next several days, we're going to hear, every excuse under the book. The prosecution or the defense is supposed to wrap up, I guess, closing arguments Monday is what they're saying, possibly. So get ready for what's coming down the road. I did want to get to an email someone sent, an unsigned person. They wrote this email, said, Rick, I heard your discussion about the union losing at Amazon, and you seem to miss the most important fact. I would argue I didn't miss it, but I just didn't highlight it. Your union lost the election. There is no win here for you. The workers clearly voiced their position. There is no court battle. There is no recount. There is nothing but the union lost. Now move on. Stop trying to spin this massive defeat into something positive. They did. The workers lost. They did. And it was predictable. It was highly predictable. And it was because of the things that we've been talking about all along. The massive amount of harassment, the massive power that these corporations have, and the fact that Amazon is a behemoth who steamrolled over these people. There are some positive things that come out of this loss. There really are. And I'm not cheerleading to, we're gonna go back after him. I'm not. For me, the two positives that have come out of this, and I said this even before the election, the positive things that have come out of it is, we got to see the thing on the front pages, in the news, the things that I've been talking about for decades. The harassment, the vicious anti-union campaign that Amazon ran. $200 million they spent. They ran a vicious campaign. They left no union busting stone unturned. They brought in all of the experts, not just one or two. They brought all of them. There was constant harassment, constant intimidation. This is what I'm hearing from people. And we get to see it. We get to see it firsthand. It's interesting that, out of one side of their mouth, they're saying nobody's urinating in bottles or defecating in bags. And then they put out a memo. Please stop urinating in bottles and defecating in bags. And you go, well, which is it? Doesn't matter. To them, truth doesn't matter. It's about winning, and winning at all costs. And that's what we saw. There was no law they were willing to not break, because the punishment there's no punishment there. They can break any law they want because they're that big and that powerful. So for me, one was the fact that we got to see a union busting campaign in public. Most of this stuff goes in the shadows. Most of this stuff never gets reported on. Nobody knows it happens except the people who are having to endure it. And I've seen it happen time and time again. I've seen grown men cry at the prospect that they're going to be broke, that they've been threatened into, we're going to close the place down, you're going to lose your job, and then you'll be blacklisted. You'll never get a job, and your kids are going to starve. It shouldn't be that difficult, because you have the right to unionize in this country. You have the right to collectively bargain. The other part of this is the first time in, really, since I was a kid, that there's been a discussion about labor rights. An honest to goodness, something's wrong kind of discussion. And it's on the front pages. And throw into that as well, not only did we get to see this horrible, vicious anti-union campaign go on $200 million campaign go on. Not only are we having this discussion of workers need a voice on the job, we also have legislation that has passed the House and is heading towards the Senate. You know, the place where progress goes to die. There is an opportunity here to take all of those three things and put them together. To take the outrage from what we saw in one of the most vicious anti-union campaigns that there has been in public, takes the discussion that, you know, wages have been stagnant for 40 years. Healthcare is more costly and more difficult for workers to get. Retirement security is all but gone. Working conditions are deplorable. And that there's a way forward. And that way forward is to pass something like the PRO Act. And I've been saying all along, look, there aren't going to be large-scale organizing drives in this country until we get major labor law reform. Now, there are a couple. Look, there's right now, there's, you know, the big news today is there are a couple of big kind of elections that are going to happen. The New York Times tech workers, for instance, 650 people have signed cards to vote for a union. And they're saying, hey, the News Guild is saying, hey, you know, just recognize the union. Let's sit down, negotiate. Let's bargain out a contract for your members. Probably not going to happen. But these are well-educated. These are professional people saying, hey, we need a seat at the table. We need to collectively bargain. You have a supermajority of cards at the Brookings Institute. Also, another supermajority of the staff that work at the Urban Institute. So you're getting these professional folks who are going, hey, you know what? We're getting our jobs gigged out. We're losing our standard of living. The best way for us to protect ourselves and our families, union contract. Stand up and fight. And we're in this interesting moment because it's no longer the factory workers or the warehouse workers or the folks who get their hands dirty who are saying, we need protections on the job. It's the white collar folks. And maybe this is the new labor movement. Maybe it will be led by the white collar people. I don't know. But what I do know, companies like Amazon, Walmart, Target, these giant behemoths, you're never going to organize them with the current laws the way they are. It's not going to happen. It's just not, especially how campaigns have been forced into dealing with individual places. I mean, stop and think about the resources that went in to try and organize 5,000 people in Bessemer, Alabama. Now we can go through, we can say that, oh, they made mistakes. Oh, they didn't have the right message. Oh, they didn't have enough cards signed. Oh, they didn't have this. Oh, they didn't do that. They ran into a buzzsaw that was willing to spend $200 million. Let that sink in for a minute. $200 million. And why? Because they didn't want to give up control. They wanted to continue to maintain the workplace that they have created where they are the dictators. And what I found interesting is I watched some of the stuff that came out of the press conference that Amazon had about, oh, how we have the right to go in and talk to the boss and we have all this stuff. And I couldn't help think of what happened at Trader Joe's a couple of weeks back, where two of the workers said, hey, we don't think you're doing enough to protect us on the job. We'd like to make suggestions, please. Here are the things that we think you should be doing to help protect us. They were fired immediately. And the guy was fired immediately. And they wrote in the discharge that you are here as an at-will employee, which means you have no rights. And that you aren't, how did they put it? You're not Trader Joe's material. You don't share our values. And I don't quite know what that means. From their point of view, I know what it means when I'm looking at it. It means you have no rights. It means that for any reason, at any moment, you can be fired. And one of the things that I talk about why people should join and form unions is the end of at-will employment. The fact that you can only lose your job for a just cause. You know, we have due process in this country. People have the ability to stand up and defend themselves. And you should be able to do that at work. But I loved the Amazon puppet show where they had people coming out and say, well, we're going to go in and we're going to make things better. I guarantee in a year, things aren't going to be any better. I guarantee in a year, they're going to make some little cosmetic changes, and they're going to get rid of all of the troublemakers. All of the people who they think may have voted for the union. Because there's no consequence for them not to. And again, I come back to the reason that we need to have major labor law reform in this country. In a secret ballot election that they put the mailbox right there on their premises with cameras on it at all times, they know who voted. And they and their union busters assessed which side of the fence you were going to be on. They did that. And when you have labor laws that are as weak as the ones we have, I feel sorry for the folks who voted. And this is they do this so that the next time you don't even think about it. They fire people, and they have fired people as a chilling effect, saying, hey, it could be you. You could be out the door. And I understand, people need jobs. They need to support their kids. They need to put food on the table. They need to do all of that stuff. And these union busters know it too. Because to them, this is war. You're not one of their valued, dedicated, loyal employees. You're the enemy that needs to be busted. You're the enemy that needs to be taken out. Because you're challenging their power and their control. The only way we're going to bring back a prosperous working class is if we have the right to be able to say, we want better wages, hours, and working conditions. It's that simple. I got lots to get to today. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Trae Crowder, the liberal redneck, going to be here to share some thoughts on the topics of the day. Stick around. Right back after this.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1873. That was the day the single most deadly incident of the Reconstruction era occurred, known as the Colfax Massacre. As many as 150 black Republicans in Colfax, Louisiana, were slaughtered by white supremacists determined to destroy advances made by the formerly enslaved. Results of the 1872 gubernatorial election in Louisiana had been hotly contested. President Ulysses S. Grant ordered federal troops in to support the Republican winner, William Pitt Kellogg. A number of black radical Republicans had also won or retained local and state political positions. William Ward, a black Civil War veteran and militia leader, had won a seat in the state legislature. By the beginning of April, he and others were being threatened with attacks on the Grant Parish Courthouse in Colfax and lynchings by defeated white Southern Democrats. Desperate for backup, Ward and others left for New Orleans to appeal for federal reinforcement. On the holy Easter Sunday, ex-Confederates, Klansmen, and Democrats rode into Colfax armed with guns, rifles, knives, and a cannon. 150 black Republicans were ready to defend their courthouse. Fighting raged on for hours, but eventually black Republicans were forced to retreat and then were massacred. 97 whites were indicted on federal conspiracy charges under the 1870 Enforcement Act, designed to enforce civil rights and root out Klan terror. The case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and resulted in the ruling United States versus Cruikshank, which essentially gutted the Enforcement Act. Of the 97 indicted, 9 were tried and 3 were initially found guilty. The Cruikshank ruling eventually overturned their convictions and effectively marked the legal end of Reconstruction. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we are most certainly in interesting times, and in these kind of interesting times, we need a little humor, something to make you laugh, even when it's incredibly absurd what's going on. In fact, today the CDC and the FDA, they paused on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, in which you got a bunch of people, kind of up in arms. When you look at the numbers, though, 6 women out of 6.8 million people developed blood clots. And I'm sitting there going, six women stopped this whole thing? It's kind of crazy. Then you had the former guy chiming in saying, no, it's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. Because evidently Joe Biden might have stock in one of the other companies. Very strange. But here to help us get through this, maybe with a smile and a laugh, I've asked Trae Crowder to come talk with us. Trae is a writer, comedian, the co-author of the Liberal Redneck Manifesto, Dragging Dixie Out of the Dark. Trae, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick. Yeah, glad to be here, buddy.
So what do you think of this Johnson & Johnson thing? 6 women. 6 women who were probably just sitting too long in the car. They got the blood clots.
Yeah, I think it's nothing to worry about for that reason. I mean, like canned meat has a higher rate of messing your blood up, I would think, than 6 out of 7 million. You know what I mean? 6 people out of 7 million. So I'm not at all worried about it. But as soon as I saw it, I was like, well, I know what this is about to be. They're going to take this ball and run with it, and make it like it's anti-vaxxers Christmas, when it comes to this situation. So I'm not surprised by any of that. You'll have that. It is what it is, but it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is the people who are most up in arms about this, at least the ones who are saying, see, I told you, are people who are never going to get the vaccine to begin with.
100%. Yes. They were never going to get it. It's people that, I mentioned canned meat earlier, but I just think about like people that I went to high school with that I see on Facebook saying they would never get the vaccine, because the government told them to. And I'm like, I saw you eat a possum because a dude named Lugnut told you to, you got real high standards now for what you're putting in your body, but it's because of the source. But you're right. They weren't going to get it either way, but that's not going to stop them from running their mouth about how big of a controversy this is, what has happened, when really it's not. The other thing is they're going to use it as validation to be like, look, we told you it wasn't safe, when in reality it's the opposite, in my opinion. It's like, no, we told you it was incredibly safe. It's so incredibly safe that you can't even get the vaccine that has a 0.000000088 failure rate or whatever. It's not even open to you because that's how safe and regulated it is. But they're not going to see it that way.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I love these cereal box epidemiologists who are telling us that it was a hoax, that the virus isn't real, and now that this is horribly tragic.
Yeah, right. Well, they say, they're like, yes, like you said, cereal box epidemiologists, they're, do your research. They'll say, it's like watching YouTube with your mouth open ain't research, like it's not what research is. It's not what that word means. But yes, it's infuriating because they're, wow, I'm about to make myself sound stupid and put myself under the same category for bringing this up. But what's the name of that phenomenon? Is it the Dunning-Kruger effect? Is that what it is, where it's like the people that are the least informed are the most confident about something because they don't have the capacity to recognize how wrong they are about the thing, So, yeah, you see that.
Your average Fox News viewer.
Right, yeah. Just see it just through the roof.
I used to say that they're not stupid, they're just over misinformed. But I got to tell you, when you're constantly over misinformed and you go, yeah, I want more of that, I gotta default to stupid.
Yeah. Oh, yes, it's definitely, I tell you what, though, it's weird. I mean, because I've said this a lot, because I grew up in Salina, Tennessee, an extremely rural town in Tennessee, like graduated with 60 people, which was the biggest class my high school had ever seen. No traffic lights, no nothing. And when I left Salina at 18, I thought I had it all figured out. I was like, okay, there's 2 parties. There's 2 types of people. There's liberals, there's conservatives, and there's smart people and there's dumb people. And that's how that works. Like the conservatives, that's dumb people. That's where all the dumb people go. And that's just how that works. But after college, I got a day job working for, as I was getting started in comedy, I worked for the U.S. Department of Energy in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, with a bunch of like high level engineers and scientists and stuff. Plenty of them were what you would expect, but some of them were like the most hard. I guarantee you, some of them are QAnon people now. They were the most hardcore, like pro Trumpy type people I'd ever met. And it made me realize, like, oh, this is just, I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like, it's more complicated than just smart versus dumb, you know? Although,
Exactly.
believe me, there's plenty of dumb for sure.
On all sides of the equation, most certainly, but just seems to be a lot on that side. And but here's the thing, I the Southern accent gets mocked a lot. So a part of your shtick is you're a bright guy, a college educated, first person to go to college in your family. Worked for the Department of freaking Energy, which I guess what was his name? Rick Perry couldn't remember.
I got out before Rick Perry, which is one of the things I've been most retroactively grateful for to my comedy fans is that they kept me from having to work for Rick Perry. When I worked for the DOE, the Secretaries of Energy was like the head of nuclear physics at Stanford, or like the head of physics and engineering at MIT. That's who ran the DOE. And then after I left in 2016, it was dancing Texas dip bleep, you know what I mean? Like, so but I missed the Rick Perry years, thankfully. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Good for you. But what I was getting to is the Southern accent is one that is synonymous with stupid, and you're clearly not a stupid guy. So and I know a lot of Southern people who are brilliant people. How do you get past that?
Well, I mean, in my experience, you have to go viral saying some not dumb stuff.
So you just fully embrace it.
Yeah, but like, honestly, that makes it sound like I'm past it, and I'm not. People still, fans of mine who have been fans of mine for a long time will still say things to me. It's like, how did you get to college? Like that, like they can't believe it. It's like, I drove, you know what I mean? Like it's a weird thing. It's fine. Like honestly, I had a huge chip on my shoulder about it when I was younger. It used to really bother me because I identified as like a smart kid and I made good grades and I was like, I'm smart, I now know that I'm not nearly as smart as I thought I was. When I left Salina, I thought I was Goodwill Hunting, right? Like literally. But I knew also that because of my accent and the way I sounded, people thought that I was stupid. And that used to really, really bother me a lot. But I got to a point where I realized that like, that could actually be to my advantage.
No, because this is where I'm going with
which is sort of how I use it in comedy. It's not, that makes it sound contrived. It's not contrived. It is, it's authentic, but I just recognize that like, oh, that can work kind of, so that's how I sort of reconcile with it.
So everything that comes out in your videos, which are fabulous, and I highly suggest people take a look at the liberal redneck stuff. It's terrific, but everything in there, you believe 100%. That's you.
Yes. And I mean, you can tell by listening to me, right? Like that again, fans of mine who have been fans since I started the liberal redneck thing 5 years ago, still to this day, I'll get comments from people who are longtime fans of mine and they'll say things like, Trae, we love you, right? You don't have to keep faking that accent if you don't want to. And it's like, I'm not faking it. Like it's not. What people don't realize is my accent is like, way dampened from when I first left my hometown. When I first left Salina, I sounded like this when I left Salina, and I got made fun of in Salina for talking proper, talking like a city boy. So it's like people don't realize how relative it all is. People think that I'm putting on a fake hillbilly accent, which like I've worked really hard to proper my accent up. Actually,
you're presentable. Got your Sunday best on.
Right. Yeah,
so
exactly.
What's the difference between a liberal redneck and a hillbilly? What's the difference?
Well, I mean, it's actually very, very regional. I've had this conversation with like the guys I tour with, Corey and Drew. They're from small towns, but in like, Corey's from North Georgia. Drew's from East Tennessee. I'm from a few, like 100 miles west in Tennessee. And even in that short of a distance, like, in Drew's hometown, hillbilly was fine. They self-identified as hillbillies, but redneck was like a pejorative. Like that wasn't a nice thing to be called. In my hometown, 100 miles west in the same state, it was actually the exact opposite. People like self-identified as redneck, and hillbilly was like kind of an insult. And now I feel like it's sort of neither and both at the same time. It like, is there a different hillbilly traditionally is like Appalachian people or people from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And then redneck is, I mean, I think Jeff Foxworthy actually had the best definition for it. He says the glorious absence of sophistication. That's, I mean, I agree with that. But in turn, like the terms themselves, I mean, honestly, I want to say they're interchangeable, but depending on where you're at in the South or in the country, people will get mad at you for that.
Right.
But like, at this point, I kind of use them interchangeably, honestly.
Yeah, you see, I have friends who live in West Virginia, and to be called a redneck is like the highest honor, because the term came from the Battle of Blair Mountain, where you had 10,000 striking miners who literally had bombs dropped on their heads by corporations, by the mine companies.
Yeah, there are West Virginians today who have tried to like sort of reclaim that designation for the word redneck, because of that. And I get it. They should, because they should be proud of Blair Mountain and their labor history and everything. But like, I think it's too far gone now to get it back to that. But I respect it, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just one of those. I was wondering if there was a difference from your perspective, because, what's interesting is, we kind of share a lot of the same views, but I grew up very differently. I grew up in an inner city housing project, the lone white kid in an all-black neighborhood. We used to play this neat game called Chase the White Kid and beat the crap out of him. But, there's a completely different way of looking at things, and yet politically we're somewhere on the same side of the map, which is interesting how two different people living in poverty come to the same kind of policy conclusions.
Yeah, because I've always thought, and look, obviously it's one of the huge things in American politics is that it doesn't always work this way. You see a huge number of people, usually white people who are living in poverty or grew up in poverty, who don't see it this way. But I actually always kind of felt like that what you just said, like, made sense. Like, I always felt like, because I grew up dirt poor. My mom was a felon and a drug addict, raised by a single dad who was on disability and everything. I mean, we had nothing. And I always felt like that to be sort of like progressive was the thing that made the most sense, given my circumstances. And I thought it made sense that we're talking about Blair Mountain in West Virginia, like poor people or working people or whatever coming together against like the man is the thing that should happen. Like you should expect that. Like, that's what I would like to see happen. But because of all the different, like, propaganda and ideology and stuff that's happened in this country, you don't see that as much as you should. But I think, like, in a perfect world, there is no poverty, but you know what I mean? To me, it totally makes sense what you just said about you and I, given our differing backgrounds. It makes sense to me that we landed on the same thing. Because, like, I think it all comes down to money at the end of the day. Poverty, socioeconomic issues are at the heart of everything, and all the rest of it is like, whatever, different coats of paint that different people put on it to serve their own purposes.
Yeah, I always said it until recently. I've amended my views. It's not really about black and white. It's about green, because where I grew up, everyone was broke. But I'm amending that a little bit because the black community has been just devastated by institutional racism and all of the the treatment by police. Look, when I was a kid growing up in the project, the cops weren't any better, and I got smacked around enough on my own. But it's clearly much worse in the black community. I want to get your thought.
Real quick, I went through the same process you just outlined too. Because, like, it's funny. It's like if people think about rednecks, they think conservative. And if they think rednecks and cops, now they're going to be like, yeah, rednecks are Blue Lives Matter people. But that's always been wild to me, because when I was growing up, like, rednecks and cops didn't get along. There's a storied history. Moonshiner hillbillies. NASCAR started with running from the law. Like,
did you watch Dukes of Hazzard?
Dukes of Hazzard, Smokey and the Bandit. Every other episode of Cops takes place in the trailer park. Like, rednecks and cops don't get along. And I used to always feel the same way as you. Was like, nah, black and white, none of that's real. It's just about green. It's poor people. That's what it is, because they hate us too. They hate poor white people too. And like, they being rich people, they do hate poor white people. But like you just said, it's not the same thing though. There is still a difference, and it is worse for, I mean, because I'm like a well-to-do white man now.
You're Horatio Alger. You pulled yourself up by the bootstraps.
Right.
Now you're a somebody.
Yeah, right. But you can't change the color of your skin, So it's not. So it ain't the same thing. But I know exactly where you're coming from, though.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts lastly on the union election that just happened down in Bessemer, Alabama,
Yeah.
and some of the messaging that came out of there. I mean, there's a view that you can't organize the South, and yet the South is where we have to organize the most.
Right.
I'm curious, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm extremely disappointed, but not surprised in that result. I want it to be different. We're talking about this. I have a live podcast that I do weekly right before your show at 5 p.m. Pacific called Weekly Skews on my social pages. And we were talking last week in depth about Bessemer and how important it was. And I do think it's important. And we were talking about West Virginia tonight and labor movements and all that. And what happened in Bessemer is hugely disappointing. But I was saying tonight, like, I don't know. It's hard because I think you need a government, you need a larger body in place who will actually look out for these people and do something about it, because I understand the perspective of like an actual working person in Bessemer who's being told by Amazon's propaganda, right? They're being told like, look, all that's going to happen is you're going to lose your job. Like, you want your job to be better, but you're not going to have it anymore. If we can't treat you like crap, we're going to go somewhere where we can treat them like crap. That's just how it works. And when that person hears that and they're like, well, I mean, this ain't ideal, but I don't want to lose my job. Like, I can't fault that person, but I hate the situation though. And as far as like the answer to it, I think there has to be a power structure in place, higher up, that can just prevent that type of thing from happening, because I don't know what else to do about it. I'll try to make this a brief story. I've got a buddy that works for a very big company in Tennessee when they first came to Tennessee, and they were talking about unionizing. This is like Bessemer, but years ago now. And they were talking about unionizing, and they had an employee retreat they had on the subject of unionizing. And they told them, like, we're going to cover both sides, so you see both sides of the argument. It's going to be a fair employee retreat on the subject of whether you should unionize or not. He said he got there. The first thing was they went in this big conference room, and there was a big banquet table lined up with donuts and coffee and all this stuff. And they said, okay, the first item on the agenda, we have this woman from the union. She's here to talk to you about the benefits of unionizing. She walks in the door, walks over to the donuts, spits on all their donuts, and starts berating all of them to their face, because obviously she didn't work for the union, but that's what they like. That's how over the top they are with the demonizing of unions. And it's like, we need something.
Yep. I'm right there with you.
It's rough. It's a rough situation.
And we got lots to do. And like I said, we do need legislation. But Trae, I appreciate you taking time for us. I got to tell you make me laugh. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
Absolutely, Rick. I'd love to. Thank you, buddy.
Beautiful. Good stuff. Trae Crowder, the comedian, co-author of the Liberal Redneck Manifesto, Dragging Dixie Out of the Dark. Make sure you take a look at that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. That was the day that 25 delegates from 17 cities gathered in Washington, D.C. to discuss forming a union for laborers. General laborers, who often perform some of the most backbreaking work on projects like digging canals and surfacing streets, were often blocked from joining craft unions as full members. The laborers in D.C. decided it was time to join together and formed the International Hod Carriers and Building Laborers Union. That was the beginning of the union that today is called the Laborers International Union of North America, or LIUNA. The union published its first constitution in English, German, and Italian, reflecting the diversity of the members that they represented. At the convention, the delegates issued a declaration of principles. In it, they declared, quote, "We hold that all men are created free and equal, and that honor and merit makes the man, and that self-preservation is the first law of nature, and that he who would be free must strike the first blow. They then went on to describe their purpose, writing, quote, "First, to gather under one grand banner all of those who toil on buildings with our craft and calling. Second, to promote by all honorable means the social and financial standing of all those who wish to partake in the fruits of amalgamation. Third, to create general agitation for the purpose of making a universal 8-hour day to increase the wages of members of the craft. Fourth, to establish a system of conciliation and arbitration in different sections of our land. Fifth, to help members of the craft in securing lawful and profitable employment. For more than a century, LIUNA has fought for the rights of laborers."
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Trae Crowder, one of the funniest guys you're going to see on YouTube. Make sure you check out his stuff over at the Liberal Redneck. Always spot on. Good stuff. But here's the thing. We got lots of work to do, lots of rebuilding to do. I just wish they wouldn't do it in front of me every day this week. You get out on the roads, the little orange cones have reappeared. And if we do what Joe Biden wants, a massive infrastructure plan, rebuilding the country, expect many more cones. And here to share some thoughts on just how many orange cones we may see, I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, and just remember, just like braces are temporary on teeth, those traffic cones are temporary on the highway, but you'll end up with a beautiful road after it's all done.
No, we desperately need it, but in the moment, I got to get somewhere. I will be appreciative that I don't have to get the car realigned every couple of months, but in the moment, gonna be a little stress.
Yeah. No, of course. And it brings up one of these issues, which is that I think some Republicans have latched onto, which is like, their definition of infrastructure is very 1950s, right? It's just bridges and roads. And when Democrats or anybody else talks about water systems or levees or broadband or school or social infrastructure, they step back and say, well, that's not infrastructure. And yeah, it's true. It wasn't infrastructure in the 1950s, or people didn't consider it, but we're in the 21st century and it's an integral part of our life. And, I think that, it's underestimated. And so that's one of the sillier debates that I've seen come up against it, is that only a portion of this is going to go to bridges and highways, and the rest is going to go to this other stuff. Well, this other stuff is vitally important to our future. And it's, and so I think that for me, I like broad definitions of infrastructure because I think it means more Americans will benefit from these investments.
No, I mean, I look at the South Dakota governor who came out and said, there's tons of stuff in here that's not, like pipes and houses. And I'm going, wait a second. Pipes and houses, that's part of infrastructure. Did I miss that day in infrastructure school? It's all of the physical things that we have. And, oh, by the way, the broadband, we need that too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's the visionaries, and you have to think about this, I think this is really important. The visionaries in America are the ones who have reimagined our economy or our systems that connect people. I think of like the Transcontinental Railroad and Abraham Lincoln, or Alexander Hamilton wanting to build out a series of canals to make us more competitive, or Eisenhower and the interstate highway system. And so this is the next logical step in all of that, because it will make us much more competitive, much more efficient, and it will save lives, and it will help deliver water and services to people who can't rely on those right now.
Right.
And if there is a definition of what government does, this is one of those things, to guarantee that, like, we have the framework to be successful. in this country.
What's interesting to me, and not to harp on the broadband thing, but what's interesting is a lot of these Republicans are from rural states that don't have the kind of infrastructure that we need to compete globally. And I maybe I'm getting a little older, but I seem to remember the internet being framed as the information superhighway. So if I'm not going too far, we've got the interstate highway system and the information superhighway system. We should probably want the best of both.
Right. I think you're right. And I think when it comes down to it, absolutely it's in rural states' interest to increase broadband investment or the electrical grid. I mean, these are states that rely on those types of services, not to mention everything else. And what I believe is happening, both with this and then, well, how do we pay for it, or it's going to be expensive, or we're raising taxes on big corporations, is that I think Republicans are trying to throw darts at this and to see what sticks with the American people. Because so far, this program is wildly popular among voters, among Democrats, among independents, and among Republicans. And so obviously they're trying to erode that a little bit. But I think at the end of the day, it's hard to vote against things that are going to benefit your own state and your own constituents tremendously and are going to create a lot of jobs.
See, now you say it's going to create a lot of jobs, yet yesterday I talked about the Republicans who had come out and said it's going to cost us jobs because this is the infrastructure plan is a slush fund, if I remember the terminology that they used, that's full of liberal ideology and it's going to kill jobs. So there seem to be alternative realities at play here.
Yeah. Yeah, there really are. And the way to break this down is a very elementary way, Rick, and it's to think about everything that goes into our infrastructure. So our roads are built out of concrete and rebar, and our bridges are built out of steel, many different types of steel. Our broadband has a lot of electrical components. Obviously, our energy grid has grain-oriented electrical steel and a lot of those the long and fiber optic cables. As well for broadband and iron water pipes, etc. And those have to come from somewhere. And guess where? They come from factories. And guess what? Those factories employ people who make good wages, who then spend the money in the community that support other jobs. So by not investing, we are definitely costing ourselves job opportunities. And it is crystal clear that not only do you get those jobs from the installation, like the construction jobs and all of that goes into it, the installation jobs, the maintenance jobs, you get those manufacturing jobs as well. And I have to believe that if you're in the working class, whether you're white, black, brown, Asian, or whatever, that this is going to be a very good deal for you. And no matter if you're in a red or a blue state. So this is a win-win. And the slush fund argument is kind of silly because it is if you look at our needs in this country for infrastructure, they're in the trillions of dollars alone. And this is a major investment. But quite honestly, even if you look at what the American Society for Civil Engineers recommend, the Biden's plan as it's constructed right now will get close to meeting that, but it won't even meet what the American Society of Civil Engineers say that we need over the next 10 years to really make rapid advancements. This will be much more about digging ourselves out of a hole and laying the foundation for a solid future.
So you're arguing that this should be a much bigger plan? This should be chunkier?
I think it should be. Yeah, I absolutely think that it could be ambitious, that they could expand it out a number of years, that they could increase the size of this, because I think that the demand for these types of projects is going to be unlimited for a while. And yeah, we will catch up. And, as you know, things like the interstate highway system do get built out. But we're sitting on an infrastructure that in many cases is 50 or 100 years old. And it was meant for a population that was half of what we have now. So we have some work to do.
Tell me about it.
We have to go back.
I've driven in the cities. We got a lot of work to do. But here's the thing, and this is one of these moments where I've been saying we're heading down the road towards the next Cold War. And I don't know that it's so much going to be about bombs and tanks and aircraft carriers as it's about broadband access. It's about being able to get products to and from to markets. It's about having a manufacturing base. This is one of those moments, and I think the pandemic really highlighted the fact that we don't make a lot of things here anymore,
right.
and that our supply chains are very weak. So for me, this is an opportunity to kind of help bolster our ability to compete with China, because they're not allowing us to be in control anymore. They are competing to be number one.
Yeah, yeah, it is I guess the Xi Jinping is a leader who many people either misunderstood or underestimated, and he has turned out to be very nationalist, very inward thinking, and wants larger ambitions for China, and that means challenging the United States. And like you, my fervent hope is that this doesn't end up in a shooting war or even anything approaching that. But what it certainly does mean is that there's going to be intensified competition, and we will collaborate when we can, but we will be adversarial in many circumstances. And so what does that mean? So, for instance, when we're looking at building out a battery infrastructure in the United States, whether it's for electric vehicles or electrical storage or whatever, we want to have the capacity to do that. Right now, 70% of the lithium-ion battery capacity is in China. If we want to build out a solar energy future, we want to be able to do that. But right now, 60% of the world's polysilicon comes from not only China, but from Xinjiang, where there is a cultural genocide underway against the Uyghur population who are forced to work in these factories. And so these are all really bad circumstances. And if we want to untangle ourselves from some of that mess, because I'm not counting on China to change. I think if China demonstrated the capacity to change in that way with respect to human rights or labor rights, this would have happened a long time ago. It didn't happen. So what does that mean for us? It means we have a strategic choice. Do we go along with these crimes against humanity, or do we build our own future as well? And this is the perfect opportunity to do that, and to make sure that we are competitive. And as Joe Biden said to a bunch of the executives just on Monday, we used to make 37, 39% of the semiconductors in the world. We make 12% right now. Let's get that back up. Let's reclaim our global market share so that we aren't dependent on another country when we're running short.
No,
because it's not a good circumstance for us to be in.
No, and I think, again, I go back to the pandemic and the fact that we didn't have enough PPE to protect our frontline workers, let alone the public as a whole. And I know now there's a push to, we got to increase our supply for PPE, but that supply chain problem goes across industries and across markets, and it's something that is much bigger than just gloves and masks and gowns. It goes all the way down the list, and you guys basically wrote the book on why our military needs to reclaim some of our supply chain.
Right. You're absolutely right. From the military to PPE to semiconductors to even like ketchup packets, we've had serious supply chain challenges. And the problem, Rick, is that, first of all, we need policy support. And I do believe that Biden is headed in that direction. I really do believe that. I mean, there may be some bumps on the road, but I believe he's headed in that direction. But I think one of the larger issues is the folks who benefit from these cheap imports. And by them, I mean our big retailers or the middlemen who then sell PPE to hospitals. They depend on those impossibly low prices from China, where it is less than the raw materials would cost in the United States to produce a finished good in many of these cases in China, just because there are no really enforced environmental or labor standards, and there's massive state government support for all of these enterprises. And it means it's really hard to gain a foothold in the U.S. market. So how do we do that? We can do that through tax policy. We can do that through trade policy. We can do that through procurement policy. And we can do that through investing in our market here. And so, Biden is starting to pull some of those levers, and I think that's a good thing. We have a long way to go, but it's going to take a while to unwind those who are invested in this, the companies like Walmart or Amazon or these middlemen in that service the healthcare sector called group purchasing organizations. and others, and even quite honestly, like clean energy developers. They have an interest in these cheap polysilicon materials from China, and they're going to resist building up an American supply chain because it's going to slightly raise their prices.
Yeah.
But look, we're a great country. We have a lot of really smart people and entrepreneurs, and if we set our mind to it on how can we make this in America, I'm 100% sure that we can get that done.
I'm right there with you. But here's the thing. I think the Walmart slogan of lower prices, better life just popped into my head. And I'm going, yeah, but it comes with crummy wages. So those lower prices don't really matter because you're still not making the money that you'd be making to be able to afford them. Oh, and by the way, the stuff that we're getting is just a bunch of cheap plastic crap that in a couple of years is going to be out of date or obsolete because they plan it that way. So you got to buy it 10 times over your life to make up the difference. So for me, lower prices, better life, that equation doesn't work.
No. Walmart's a great case study here because originally when it was founded, big American flags, they draped themselves all over Americana. As it turned out, they led the offshoring charge. The carnage they cost in manufacturing amounted to hundreds of thousands of American jobs, and they kept wages low. And now they've discovered two things. They have a hard time getting American suppliers because they drove them all out of business. And so they have a PR program about purchasing American goods that does a little good, but it's not nearly enough to undo the damage they did. And they realize they have to pay slightly better wages as well so that fewer of their workers are on public assistance programs. And they're way behind the curve on this, but it is going to take them it is going to take policy. It's going to take a system of incentives to change this, because after all, it were those incentives that Walmart took advantage of in the first place, both our domestic laws and then our trade policy that allowed them to create this system that exploits so many people. And so it will take policy to unwind that, and so that we can have a more equitable future and that we can rebuild manufacturing in this country.
Real quick, about 30 seconds. Are you surprised that Biden hasn't taken the tariffs off? I know there were the Section 232 steel tariffs that are in place. I know we're calling on him to hold those in place. Are you surprised he hasn't taken them off?
Well, look, if you looked at the Joe Biden who was a senator or who was a vice president, I would be surprised that he hadn't taken off. But I really do think that he has transformed his views on economic and trade policy. And so even his Commerce Secretary has said repeatedly now, the tariffs are working. And we agree. And until there is a global solution to this massive steel overcapacity, they have to stay in place, Rick. They absolutely do.
No, I agree. And look, I was in favor of the tariffs all along. It's one of the things that I thought Trump did right, even though there wasn't a strategy to go with them. It's not the only club you have in the bag.
That's right.
But at least I gave him credit for that. But Scott, I appreciate the time. Good stuff as always. Thanks so much.
You bet, Rick. Keep up the great work. Thanks for having me on.
Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Make sure you check out their work, AmericanManufacturing.org. Good stuff. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. Labor leader and socialist Eugene V Debs was sent to prison for speaking out against World War I. Debs was a well-known figure. In 1894, he had led the American Railway Union out on a strike against the Pullman Railway Car Company. 250,000 railway workers walked off the job in support of the strike until it was brutally crushed by the United States military. Debs was arrested and served time in prison for his role in the strike. Due to his popularity, government officials were alarmed by Debs' pacifist stance. So, in 1917, when he gave a speech against World War I in Canton, Ohio, he was arrested under the Espionage Act. The act had been passed a few months prior, making it illegal to interfere with the armed services recruitment efforts during wartime. At his trial at a federal court in Cleveland, Ohio, Debs defended himself. In his final statement, he explained his motivation. I am thinking this morning of the men in the the mills and the factories, of the men in the mines and on the railroads. I am thinking of the women who for a paltry wage are compelled to work out their barren lives, of the little children who in this system are robbed of their childhood. He was found guilty, and so on this date he started his 10-year sentence. In Cleveland, infuriated unionists and socialists led a protest of Debs' imprisonment. Violence broke out during the march. Mounted police and even tanks were brought in to suppress the demonstrators. In the aftermath, 2 people were killed, more were injured, and dozens were arrested. While in prison, Debs ran for President of the United States on the socialist ticket, receiving nearly 1 million votes. Finally, in 1921, President Harding commuted Debs' sentence to time served. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
An old political truism notes that where there's a will, there are 1,000 won'ts. And what a hurricane of won'ts swirled out of Washington's power centers in March to pummel Joe Biden. Corporate lobbyists and their congressional hirelings howled at him for declaring that he would seek a tax increase on corporations to pay for the essential overdue job of repairing and expanding our nation's antiquated, dilapidated infrastructure. Blowhard Mitch McConnell, the GOP Senate leader, blustered that poor corporate America should not be singled out to bear this burden. But wait, Mitch singled out the corporate giants in 2017 to receive a massive cut in their tax rate. So even with a slight increase now, they'll pay much less than regular people. Also, the giants worm loopholes in the law to cut their taxes further. Indeed, 55 of the biggest, most profitable corporations paid 0 in U.S. income taxes last year. As Bernie Sanders points out, if you paid $120 for a pair of Nike shoes, you paid more to Nike than it paid in federal income taxes over the past 3 years, while it made $4 billion in profits. Mitch and his fellow hypocrites cynically profess that they support restoring America's infrastructure, but, he says, asking our corporate political funders to pay more is not going to get support from our side. So who do they want to pay for it? You, working people and the poor. Senator Roy Blunt, a Missouri Republican and a leader of Mitch's team, points to putting more user fees on drivers and adding taxes on consumers as the way to go. This is Jim Hightower saying, to see a list of other major corporate scofflaws who have been pocketing billions in profits yet paying zilch for the upkeep of America, go to the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, itep.org. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, you had the white police officer who shot the man on Sunday. Just horribly tragic. She resigned, as did the chief of police. I don't know if this helps much. I mean, still a 20-year-old man. Dante Wright is still dead. Does it matter if it was a mistake? Does it matter if she meant to tase him instead of shoot him? I don't know. And here to share some thoughts on where we go from here and why over air fresheners dangling from a mirror this stop even happens. I've asked Diablo Brooks to come talk with us. He's a senior director of field mobilization for the People for the American Way. Diallo, thanks for taking time for us.
How you doing, Rick?
I'm good. So, is this anything? The female officer has resigned. The police chief's resigned. This to me is just a way to try and say, "Oh, hold on, don't protest anymore. We've taken care of it." Does this matter to you?
No, the resignations don't matter to me, and it's not even a Band-Aid solution to the real problem that we continue to see in our communities with the attack on black folks or just driving while black. And it's a tragedy that continues to happen, and we need to see real change in this country to end this kind of police violence.
Am I getting this right? I mean, they were just air fresheners hanging from the mirror. This is a primary stop thing now. Is this what it was over?
Yeah, that's what it seems like it was over, and that's what's been reported. I think more details will come. But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter what it was about. The fact that he was an unarmed individual, unarmed black man that was pulled over. There was multiple police officers at the scene, and this officer decided to shoot Dante Wright and kill Dante Wright. It's just another tragedy, and it's a lot of trauma that is happening to the black community, and we don't seem to see answers to these problems. It's continuous tragedy.
It just seems like, and maybe it's just that I'm hyper aware now, but it just seems like every day there's something going on. I mean, there was also the soldier in Virginia who was pepper sprayed for I don't know what reason, and then I'm watching the cop hold the gun the way I'm going. What kind of training did you get to do that? I'm just looking at this stuff, going, has it always been this bad? Has this always been how egregious people have been treated?
Yeah, this is not something new. It's been a long time thing that's happened within our community, and how police officers have interacted with black communities for a long time. And unfortunately, we don't see the accountability being placed at their feet for taking these types of actions. I don't think any other community would stand for, or this country wouldn't stand for it happening to any other community in the way it happens to the black community. And I think everybody has to be concerned, because if police officers can act this way to black folks, they can act this way to anybody. But like I said, it's a continuous tragedy. It's something that's been swept under the rug for many, many years. I think with body cameras and people's cell phone cameras and technology, there's been, in social media, this information has been shared more broadly. People have actually been able to kind of pull back the cloak and actually see what's happening on a regular basis. And so I think for a lot of folks, this is fresh and new. But as an African American, as a black man, I've known this type of thing to happen for a very long time. And it's, whether it's a killing or it's just inappropriate interactions with the police, interacting with the community has been a long-standing problem. And we need to do the hard work to create real change, to save people's lives, to make public safety real for everyone.
I want to talk about that in a second, but the excuse right now is that it was a mistake. This 26-year veteran police officer, she thought that she'd pulled her taser, and and then the audio is she expletive, I shot him. She thought I don't know how you pull a taser and think it's a gun. I understand it does happen. Does that matter?
No, it doesn't matter, because it's part of this is a pattern. This is not a one-off thing, and she's been on the force for a very long time. She's been somebody, I think, that's trained other officers, and I think she's head of the police union there. I mean, so this is not somebody who just came on the job yesterday. This is somebody that's been on the job, and to take somebody's life and call it just an accident is, I think, really kind of like insulting the intelligence of our community.
So let me ask you, because the response I'm getting from a lot of listeners is, had they just listened, had the soldier just gotten out of the car as he was told, had this guy just, put his hands behind his back and be arrested, he would still be alive today. The other guy wouldn't have gotten pepper sprayed. What response do we give to that?
The response is that the police officers are not jury and executioners. Their job is, if there's a violation, to deal with it appropriately. And this individual didn't have a weapon on them. This individual didn't pose a threat. And but we continuously see police officers use excessive amounts of force to deal with black people. And like I said, if this happened to any other community, I think there would be folks that would be willing to do the hard work to create change. But, I mean, look, at the end of the day, we've seen folks around the country that have conducted mass shootings, killed mass amounts of people, and have tremendous amounts of firearms on them being peacefully brought in by police officers.
And even taken to Burger King.
Take it to Burger King to get a burger. But you see a young man, 20-year-old, with multiple police officers around them being shot to death. That is just wrong. It is, and it's beyond kind of something that we can all just wrap our heads around, except for saying that there is a level of violence that is happening to the black community that doesn't happen to other communities at the same percentage rate.
No, I agree with you, but the response is always, had they just listened, had you just done what you were told, you'd be fine. And look, every time one of these comes up, there's always something, and we don't know what happens before the cameras start rolling in a lot of cases. Right. So because I know people who look at the George Floyd video and they are disgusted. To me and to many other people I know, it's clear and cut that this was wrong. But they all go back, well, had he just gotten in the car, that's one of those things that I keep struggling with. Going, had he gotten in the car, that wouldn't have happened. But he didn't just get in the car, and this is still not how you treat somebody.
Exactly. There's no excuse for it. I mean, if you look at the George Floyd situation, you look at this particular situation, as more details continue to come out, is it the responsibility of the police to kill somebody if they just basically don't obey a command or don't do things exactly the way they want them to do? We always talk about de-escalation, and in a lot of these situations and circumstances, you see the police officers actually escalate the level of violence that's needed in that particular situation, or the tension in that particular situation. You watch a lot of these officers not, tone down the situation, make the situation easier, take some time, work these situations out in a way that has a peaceful ending. And like I said, as a black man, it's hard to not think that when officers approach us, they look at us differently.
I grew up in a predominantly black housing project on the west side of Cleveland, and and this is going back into the late 70s, early 80s. The police were very rough with people. They weren't shooting people, so to speak, but they would knock people around. And look, I've been knocked around by cops in the past. It's gone to another level. For me, it comes back to the training. And I remember, look, I'd been arrested, and I remember put your hands on the car, and they'd take your hand, put it behind your back, and they handcuffed you, and they'd take you off. I can't remember the last time I've seen somebody handcuffed while standing up. Every time I see something, they've been tackled, thrown to the ground, manhandled, people holding their arms and their legs and basically pushing their face into the ground. And it comes back to the training.
Yeah, it comes back to the training, but also there's this thing about accountability. It's funny because certain folks want accountability for some, but not accountability for others. And if you don't hold folks accountable for these bad behaviors, if you have things like qualified immunity, and you have these police unions that protect these officers in ways that that a normal person under the similar types of circumstances would not have that same level of protection, then, you see these situations escalate beyond where they need to be. I think officers would think twice. I think police officers in general would think twice if there was a level of accountability for their actions. But if you feel like you're justified to act in this way, and if there is nobody that's going to hold you accountable, or the people that are there to hold you accountable are folks just like you, then you're more likely, in my opinion, to act out in that way. And I think the accountability has to go along with training, because we've talked about training for a long time, and I think some departments have enforced more training. But the thing is, you have to be a willing participant in that training. You have to want that training. You have to take that training and actually use it when you move to the street. I actually did a conversation with some police officers, and they said, it's funny because you talk about training, you go through the academy, and when you get out in the street and you first, as a rookie police officer, get in a police car with a veteran police officer, the veteran police officer tells you, forget about the training that you had at the police academy. The training starts now in the street. And so when you have that kind of mentality, when you have that kind of code that's happening behind the scenes with officers, then, you can have training, but if it doesn't translate to action, then there's a problem. And I think accountability is a part of that action that needs to be put in place.
What do you say to the people who go, because it sounds like you're going to the place where a lot of friends have said that it's systematic. It's not just a few bad apples. But what do you make of that argument that, hey, these are just a few bad apples on their worst day. They didn't mean to escalate these things. Bad situations happen. What's the response there?
I mean, bad apples spoil the barrel. You know what I'm saying? If you get a bushel of apples and you have some bad apples in that barrel eventually becomes a tainted barrel. Many more apples become spoiled. And I think that we cannot sit and just have an excuse of a couple of bad apples and not look at the system that reinforces the existence of those bad apples. I think a lot of hard work needs to be done in the communities all over this country to really reimagine how we do public safety. Who needs to respond to various incidents? Sometimes you might not need folks with guns to respond to certain situations. If this was a minor traffic stop, did it need to escalate to this level? Most people thinking if it's true that it was pulled over because of air fresheners hanging from his rearview mirror, most people would wonder why a police officer would even pull them over in the first place for that.
No, and that was my thing. I mean, there are too many things that they use for primary enforcement. Like back when they first started mandating seatbelts, when the laws started coming out, it was a secondary enforcement. If you got pulled over for something and you didn't have your seatbelt on, they'd hit you. And then it was, now it's going to be a primary enforcement thing, which just meant it was another reason for you to be pulled over and have your day interrupted. And those interactions never go well. They're heated from the beginning. And then you have a hothead cop come up to the window and start giving you guff. It can easily escalate into problems. And look, I have a black friend who says, now imagine you get pulled over every week. It's one thing to go through this once a year, once every couple of years. Imagine every week. Imagine every other day. Then it becomes the situations. And I think a lot of people don't realize that that's what happens.
Right. And it creates anxiety, it creates frustration, it creates fear. And you wonder why folks react the way they react during a police stop with that level of interaction. You're going to have some anxiety. You're going to have some fight or flight reactions in those situations because you continuously hear stories, you see it, you experience it, and so you're not going to be comfortable interacting with police officers if you've been treated this way in the past.
Now, you said fight or flight. A lot of people are going to say, the street corner, and this is what I've told my kids because there's a lot of talk about parents having conversations on how to deal with the police with their children, and maybe it's because I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood that I had the conversation with my kids. Who certainly are not going to have the interactions that maybe your kids are going to have. But I said, look, on the street with the cop is not the place to argue. It's not the place to fight. Whatever he says, even if it's wrong, you do it. The place to fight, the place to argue is in court. Don't get yourself beat up. Don't get yourself shot. They're the boss out there. Give them that. Give them their power trip. But in the courtroom, that's where you go to seek your justice because you're going to lose every single time on the street because these things happen, and I have a lot of people who have that same kind of mentality. So when you're talking about fight or flight, isn't this the kind, I guess, what should police do if like this kid just decided he was going to take off? What should have happened?
Well, there's a lot of tactics that we've seen all over the world where police interact with somebody, particularly somebody who does not have a weapon, does not pose a threat to their lives, is take a much more de-escalated approach to dealing with the individual. I think when you lower the tension the interaction can go very, very different. But when you interact with a high volume of force, you escalate a situation, and the anxieties and fears that already exist in Black people's minds around the interaction with police are exacerbated in that particular situation. And, officers are trained to deal with this stuff. You've talked about it before. There's been training, and particularly in this situation, when you look where there's an officer that is on trial in a neighboring jurisdiction, that the most public trial that there could be. It's been on CNN, it's been on the news, it's been on it's been on public television. Everybody is covering it, and then at the same time you're still having this kind of forceful interaction with folks. I mean, it just shows that folks are not paying attention, and folks, quite honestly, have circled the wagons and said it's police against everybody else. And what I said, it's a great example that you said that you grew up in a predominantly African American community, and while not being African American, you still instill those values. These types of incidents spill over into other communities as well. When police take these liberties, it disproportionately happens to Black folks, but it happens to other folks. It happens to marginalized communities. It can be poor white communities that have maybe similar experiences, not at the same rate, but it's something that if we want to really talk about public safety, we have to do policing differently than we're doing in this country, because as we see, it's not working the way it's happening right now.
Last question I've got for you, because there's this push, there was a push, I don't know if there still is, to defund the police, which I'm not in favor of. I support the police when they're not wrong. I think they need to be held accountable, but I think it's something that we still need. We just need to do it, I think, better. And look, I do want our policemen to be protected on the job. I want them to go home at the night at the end of their shift as safe as when they came in. So how do we get to a point to where this stuff stops and we move to a point where we do have community policing and relations are better, if that's possible?
I think it is possible, and I think there's places there in this country where there's folks trying to take some bold steps to really rethink how we do policing. It's not getting rid of police totally, but it's re-examining the approaches. I know in Ithaca, New York, a young mayor, Chauvin Myrick, and the city council in Ithaca, and then also the county council there as well, unanimously passed a reimagining public safety proposal that the mayor put forward that really takes limits the force of police officers and the number of folks that actually have guns, and reinvest some of that money into places where they have mental health responders, they have social work responders, they have a civilian-led force to deal with some traffic enforcement that takes the interaction, the amount of interactions that the police have to have with the community. Because there's a lot of social work jobs that police are forced to do right now. And I think we need to take some of that away from the police department and put it into the appropriate places and let the police deal with the really, high-end, violent crimes that they might have to deal with in particular cities, and really have other folks focus in on responding to mental health challenges, responding to, traffic violations in ways that don't bring an armed officer into that particular space. And then the limited contact will then also limit these incidents and save lives. And so I think, like I said, in Ithaca, they're experimenting with that, and I think it'll be something that we can see happening in other cities around the country. And the mayor there, Chauvin Myrick, has been bold with his proposal, and the city council has been bold by passing it and working through the details. And I think this is an experiment that's underway, and we need to be looking to models like that to create real change.
Yeah, I'm thinking about you because I've known a number of policemen over the years, and they always tell me that traffic stops are like domestic violence calls are extremely dangerous. And I'm imagining now an unarmed person pulling somebody over, and the danger that could pose to them. And I'm going, I don't know what the answers are, and I'm glad that there are people experimenting. but it's most certainly something we have to do. But I know I wouldn't want to be the guy pulling someone over unarmed and in the middle of the night. Just my thought.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, there's probably different scenarios for different circumstances and situations. But like I said, if you're limiting the amount of opportunities to actually have to pull somebody over in the middle of the night, I think it makes a difference as well. I think there's a double tension there too, because there's a black man driving in the middle of the night, and having a police officer pull you over on a dark road is also equally as scary.
No, I understand 100%. I'm with you, and I wish we would do away with a lot of the nonsensical reasons that people get pulled over, like from having air fresheners dangling from the rear mirror. But Dalio, I appreciate you taking time for us and sharing some thoughts. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Look, I don't know the answers. I don't know anyone who does. But I know what we're doing now, not really working. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
It is a crisis at Piney Point. Tonight, crews are working around the clock to prevent an environmental disaster.
Florida races to prevent massive toxic wastewater breach.
Good infrastructure planning is always about looking to the future.
Biden administration pushes back on Republican opposition to infrastructure jobs. Japan sees earliest cherry blossom peak in 1,200 years. Plus, victory for breathers in Springfield, Massachusetts.
Breathe easy. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
And I was shocked by how much doesn't go into infrastructure. It goes into pipes and different initiatives.
Our water system is not infrastructure. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, I think she just cemented her status as the GOP's 2024 presidential frontrunner. Nice work, lady. Have another glass of lead. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, this story is not getting a lot of coverage, but it sure seems like it should.
Yes. Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis declared a state of emergency over the weekend because a toxic wastewater reservoir near Tampa Bay is in danger of imminent collapse. More than 300 homes have been evacuated from the area surrounding Piney Point, a closed phosphate processing plant. Unable to plug the leaks, authorities are now working to drain the reservoir, according to Scott Hopes, acting Manatee County administrator.
We're talking about the potential of about 600 million gallons within a matter of seconds and minutes leaving that retention pool and going around the surrounding area. Keeping in mind that some of the water in that pool is salt water, which doesn't go very well with our potato crops and things like that.
But that means pumping millions of gallons of contaminated wastewater into Tampa Bay.
Isn't there also some radioactive waste involved with this story as well?
Yes, the plant's waste has some radioactivity, but they say that the water itself is not radioactive.
Oh, I'm sure everything will be fine.
Officials do say that the contaminated water is within legal limits, but environmental groups warn that the releases of water contaminated with mining waste, phosphorus, and nitrogen could trigger a red tide of toxic algae, which Clearwater Marine Aquarium warns could kill threatened manatees in Tampa Bay. The cost of cleanup and restoration at the Piney Point site could cost as much as $200 million. State officials were warned about this exact scenario when the plant closed 20 years ago. President Biden's new $2 trillion infrastructure jobs proposal, released last week, would help with that kind of dangerously decrepit, aging infrastructure and abandoned industrial sites.
No, Republicans don't want any of that money. They don't want any help at all. Governor Ron DeSantis, I'm sure, is not interested.
Yes, we'll get to that in a moment. The massive package would repair roads and bridges, water systems, ports, airports, but also take action to cut carbon emissions by modernizing the electric grid, building a national electric vehicle charging network, and much more. New polling shows strong majorities of Americans, including Republican voters, support Biden's infrastructure proposal, but Senate Republicans have already said they will not support it, and several other Republicans have attacked the proposal for not keeping to their extremely limited and narrow definition of traditional infrastructure as covering only roads and bridges. In an interview with Fox News, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg pushed back, citing the deadly Texas blackout in February.
I don't know why anybody would say it's a mistake to invest in the grid after what we just witnessed in Texas. So yes, infrastructure includes energy infrastructure.
Buttigieg also said that a national electric vehicle charging network is absolutely critical infrastructure.
Good infrastructure planning is always about looking to the future. Railroads weren't part of infrastructure until we built them. Now it's time to prepare for the future. And the millions of jobs that will be created by this bill are because this bill looks to the future.
In other news, Japan's famous cherry blossoms have peaked at the earliest date in more than 1,200 years. That's according to data collected by Osaka University. Researchers said cherry trees are extremely temperature sensitive, and the observed trend toward ever earlier peaks to the season is most likely due to man-made global warming. Finally, some good news for things that breathe in Massachusetts. The Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection has revoked a permit for a developer to build a controversial massive wood-burning power plant in Springfield, literally to burn wood to generate electricity. The agency revoked the permit on pollution and environmental justice grounds. Springfield residents have been fighting the plant for 12 years because their town has one of the highest rates of asthma in the nation.
Wood is renewable energy, isn't it?
Yes, it is, but it is dumb to burn it for electricity when we have clean solar and wind.
Well, maybe dumb is in the lungs of the beholder. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, as I said earlier, six women developed blood clots after receiving the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. 6. I mean, this is so far what the reactions that we've gotten. 6 women's got blood clots out of something like 6.8 million people. Literally 1 in a million. And the FDA and the CDC have called for it to be paused. I guess they're going to do some more research, do some more something. Question is what happens to all those people who had shots lined up for the next couple of days? And is this a smart thing to do? Here to share some thoughts. One of those folks who today was ready to go, be jabbed with the needle, was ready to get his vaccine, the 1-dose Johnson & Johnson, only to have it canceled. That's why I've asked Bill Scher to come talk with us. He's a contributing editor over Politico magazine and someone who didn't get his shot today. Bill, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be with you.
So no shot. Bad thing.
I was 2 hours away. 2 hours. And I'll tell you, I was angry. I was upset. I was really hoping just to have us all be done with. And I have a piece about this, by the way, coming out in the Washington Monthly tomorrow morning that I wrote over the course of the day. When you're a good liberal, this kind of when a government action negatively affects you, it conjures up some mixed emotions. You have that kind of knee-jerk conservative libertarian response. How dare the government mess with my life like this? But if you give yourself some time to think about more rationally and let your emotions catch up to the news, you'll start to get back to having some perspective again. And the thing that complicates is social media. There's always going to be second guessers, and now the second guessers can pour onto social media right away, and that can almost become the established narrative. So you had a lot of folks, understandably, saying 6 cases out of 6 million people, 7 million people, that's statistically insignificant. Why would you have this pause and inject all this uncertainty and increase vaccine skepticism?
That's where I was at.
Are you going to end up hurting? Are you going to cause more damage, have less vaccines in people's arms than if you just kept quiet? But here are the nuances to the problem. So number one, we don't know if there's only 6 cases. There's 6 reported cases. We don't know if there's any causality to it. We don't know if the vaccines actually cause the blood clotting, but the scientists want to know more.
Right.
They need more data. And number 3, the specific kind of clotting that occurred should not be treated the way other kinds of blood clots occur. And doctors need to know that. So if there wasn't any time to communicate to the medical professionals, you might get more deaths as other clotting episodes materialize. And there might be cases that have already happened that weren't as severe as the 6 that they are aware of, but you want to know about the mild cases because you're trying to learn what actually happened here. So there's actual value to the pause to get more data, understand the data, and communicate to doctors, what do we do about this? And in the meantime, you have other vaccines. You have Pfizer and Moderna. Now, look, I'm annoyed because I would have been done today. And according to the CDC's definitions, 2 weeks after your last dose, whether it's a second dose of Pfizer or Moderna or the 1 dose J&J, 2 weeks after that, you're fully vaccinated. I would have been fully vaccinated as of April 27th if all things went according to the initial plan. Now, I was able later today to get another vaccine appointment. Took a little doing, but I got there. It's for Pfizer. It's a 2-shot. I was able to schedule both appointments. So my second appointment will be May 7th. I'll be fully vaccinated as of May 21st, about 1 month later. That's no big deal so long as I don't get COVID between now and then. If I did, you can imagine I'd be very annoyed. However, if I get COVID between now and then, it's because I did something.
Right.
I engage in something. I mean, not saying I'm not the most reckless person in the world, but people are imperfect. I have gotten government information to social distance, wear masks, sanitize my hands, etc. The government is still trying to do things to help me, including the development of these other vaccines. Whereas if the government knew information about this blood clotting episode and was nonchalant about it, and they kept having the J&J vaccine, and there ended up being more episodes, then our federal government becomes directly responsible for those deaths. So that's why it's hard to judge this just in terms of a raw number thing. There's also this question of who's responsible here. We have to expect our federal government to give us information that we can use, and so we can act responsibly. And if we don't, then it's our fault, and then not the government's fault.
No, I'm with you on that. And as I was reading through this, I was going, it's 1 in a million. It's 6 women out of 6.8 million, and it's only 1 in a million, and that's not bad unless you're the 1 in a million. Right. That's usually me.
And obviously, odds are very low here, and it should not make anybody skeptical about the vaccines in general. Remember, the Johnson & Johnsons only got distributed as of 6 weeks ago.
Right.
The Pfizer and the Modernas have been going out for a longer period of time, and we know there have not been any severe reactions to that. So there's no reason for people to be broadly suspicious about all vaccines, because not only do we have this episode, but the government acted responsibly in reaction to it. No one's hiding the ball here. That's what we want is credibility. We want is transparency. We are getting that. So let's not that make us become hyper conspiratorial. Let's accept the information that our government's giving us and proceed accordingly.
Yeah, but what I find interesting is the people who are the most apoplectic over this are the ones who are never going to get the vaccine to begin with. This just plays into that. And look, I was with, and I am, kind of going, how many people are going to die or get sick because they didn't get the vaccine, and if you have to weigh that, which is smarter, is it to keep giving the vaccine because you need it, as opposed to, we know more people are going to get sick by not getting it. So there's a calculation there, and I see your point. Our government has come out and said, look, this is what we're looking at. We want more information. We're going to pause it, and especially since, and again, my first thought was how much of this has to do with the Johnson & Johnson mix-up in Baltimore. Are there other places that have had mix-ups where who knows what could have happened in the manufacturing process?
Well, and we're doing something that is very unusual to roll out vaccines this quickly, this urgently, in the wake of a pandemic. To expect things to go off without a hitch is not realistic.
Right.
The fact that it's gone as well as it has is quite amazing. So I think we've got to be careful not to nitpick and get all bent out of shape every time something doesn't go exactly according to plan. We're trying to vaccinate, hundreds of millions of people in a very short time frame, and we should not be shocked that there's some hiccups along the way.
Right, and look, you're talking about 6 people, and this is where the punchline was. You're talking about 6 people who they could have gotten blood clots because they sat too long waiting for the vaccine to happen. The drive was too far, because I got no buddies of mine who are truck drivers. They've had leg clots because they sat too long.
I mean, there are all sorts of reasons why it could happen. Now, again, and I'm not a scientist here, so don't take my word for anything. But hearing that these blood clots need to be treated differently than other kinds of blood clots make me think it's not
okay.
The regular kind of blood clot.
Could it be birth control pills? Because, as my wife reminded me, birth control pills themselves cause blood clots.
I mean, again,
that's
you
so
need
much of
to
that
have
stuff.
more research done here.
No.
So they should proceed. They should proceed cautiously. And meanwhile, there are other vaccines on the market to be had and should be gotten. We should be thankful that that the government has been as involved as it has been.
Yep.
As being as transparent as it has been. And things are going in a good direction overall, even though things aren't absolutely 100% perfect. And that brings to a larger point, I think, when we talk about just the Biden administration, government in general. I think people have criticized the Obama years as imperfect, didn't go big enough, didn't go fast enough.
That would be me.
And all Biden had to do is just deliver good things, do nice things, and be competent, and everyone's going to love you. You're going to win elections. And I mean, yes, you should try to do nice things and be competent. But if governing was that simple all the time, we wouldn't have so many complicated problems.
No, you're right.
I mean, here's a situation where, Biden has competent people taking it seriously, clearly better than we were in the Trump administration. But some decisions come down the pike that just don't have neat and easy answers. And even competent people are going to make decisions that not everybody is going to like. And if we set expectations too high and say that Biden is going to be some kind of, superhuman.
He's not the savior.
Not a savior. No one can be. You have to balance the desire to push for bigger and bolder things with some expectation setting, so people don't get all out of kilter when things don't go absolutely perfectly.
No, you're right. So the solution here would no more women get the vaccine.
Well, I mean, I've heard some people say, well, they shouldn't have stopped J&J for everybody. They should have just stopped it for women. And that would have helped me. But again, I'm not the scientist. Do I know that this only affects women just because this very, very, very small data set of 6 people were all women? Maybe there's some men out there that had the blood clots that just haven't been reported yet. You can't know. So that's why I think they erred on the side of caution here.
So you're not buying the former president's theory that Biden did this because I guess he has Pfizer stock. Is that what the story is? That there's a big conspiracy because we're trying to push the Pfizer? Is that what I'm getting?
Maybe Trump had the Johnson & Johnson stock and he's upset with how this has gone. He's projecting on Biden.
But what I find interesting about that is the fact that he would come out with that tells me that that's his thinking of governing. And it's what we lived through for the last 4 years. Usually the first thing that comes out of somebody's mouth is what they would do in this situation. I fully believe that that's what he would do.
I think Trump, projected, all the time. That was his go-to move, to accuse the other guy of what he was doing himself or what he would like to be doing himself. And this is an unusual ex-president who is not going to do the go away quietly thing, is not going to do the elder statesman thing, could well be running again himself. And so he is inclined to attack the way he always has and not worry about if those attacks are at all based on any kind of evidence.
Yeah, the one thing I'm happy about that he's still flirting around with the idea of running is there'll be no Trump presidential library because he's still thinking about running. But the thing that scares me is I think if he runs in 24, he could win.
I mean, I don't think Trump is very well positioned to win again. I think obviously he has his hardcore base. I think he has damaged himself, not just amongst Democrats, but amongst the middle of the country as well. So I think he would have a hard time, but we certainly can't assume this early out that everything in 2024 is going to be pointing the Democrats' direction. We have no idea what the economy is going to look like. We have no idea what kind of foreign policy crises could materialize. We don't know what kind of health condition Joe Biden's going to be in. So there's lots of things that could go wrong.
Yep.
We can't know in advance. And look, and certainly when an incumbent president is having a problem for whatever reason, that's good for a challenger, whoever that challenger may be. So that would be a situation where Trump could try to play an "I told you so" card and sneak back in there. But probably Republicans would be better off with somebody who is not named Trump, and it didn't have nearly the kind of baggage that he would bring into any kind of campaign.
So Ivanka's not going to take his place?
Well, apparently she's skipping out on the Florida race. So maybe, I don't know if she would want to do it, or if Don Jr. wants to do it, or if Lara Trump wants to do it. I mean, this family is crazy enough that maybe more than one would do it, and they'd have a family fight in front of our eyes. But I'm one to believe that the Republican Party would be well suited to move on from Trump and pick somebody for 2024 who had a cleaner slate. And the question becomes, will the Trump clan allow them to do that?
Yeah, it doesn't look like that. It doesn't look like the party's ready to do that yet, especially if you looked at the Women for Trump rally over the weekend. But I did real quick. I wanted to get your thoughts of the rollout of the vaccine overall. I think Biden has done a very good job. I think we've brought back some some confidence in government, and I think this is part of that. But I'm curious your thoughts so far of these first several weeks.
Look, I mean, I think the fact that the vaccine trajectory is going in the right direction, more and more every week. The relief money is getting out the door. That passed very quickly, obviously, are strong points in Biden's favor. I think what's tough for Biden now is everything else. There is not a whole lot else Biden can do at all with just 50 votes in the Senate. Even when he can get with 50 votes, he can't get done quickly. Infrastructure, a good chunk of it you could do with 50 votes, but he does not have 50 votes in hand to pass a bill today. There's going to be weeks and months of negotiation to figure out what can be passed. So the one thing I think he hasn't done is figured out how he can build on the success that he has, because he took the shortcut to get what he got quickly, and that shortcut's not always going to be available to him going forward.
No, I understand that, but for me, you got to get the infrastructure bill done. And if Republicans aren't going to come along, you've got to go the route that's available to you, and you got to hold Democrats accountable. You got to pull them in.
I mean, I think that's right. I mean, the catches are, one, what will be allowable in reconciliation. You can't do everything you want infrastructure through reconciliation, and that's a bit of an unknown. No one knows exactly what the parliamentarians are going to rule on each individual piece of this, so that's murky. Then there's the question of, what do you have 50 Democrats unified for? You have some Democrats saying, well, you have to remove the SALT cap. This is the thing that's hitting the Northeast states and California the hardest, where you can't deduct all of your state and local taxes anymore. Some folks are mad about that. Joe Manchin thinks that Joe Biden's corporate tax hike is too much. AOC and others say Biden's bill is too small. $2 trillion is too small. It should be $10 trillion. How much are they going to dig in their heels on that score? And if it's decided, if Manchin forces you and says, look, I'm not even going to do any reconciliation with you, I'm going to make you talk to Republicans, does that force them to go down from $2 trillion to $1 trillion or less? Because Roy Blunt's out there talking about $618 billion for something that's limited to physical infrastructure. If Biden shook that hand, got that handshake deal today, AOC and others probably walk. But if we're 4 or 5 months into this, we're banging our head against the wall, will some Democrats say, well, geez, maybe $700 billion is better than zero, so I'll take it.
Yeah, you got to take a win.
There's a lot of moving pieces here, and a lot of uncertainties, and it's not going to be a quick win the way the relief bill was a quick win.
No, we've got a long months ahead of us, and every day my problem is every day our infrastructure grows more decrepit and more crumbling, and the Chinese are moving that much further ahead, and we're just mired in this this division where we just can't seem to get anything done.
Well, China doesn't have a problem like a legislature have to worry about to pass do infrastructure investment.
There is that. They don't have a Senate where all progress goes to die.
I mean, as I tell folks, you can poll infrastructure. Should we spend $2 trillion infrastructure? You'll probably get a poll number and say, absolutely, 60%, 70%. Now talk about the project happening in your community. How easy a project is that to get done? Because almost every infrastructure project engenders some opposition somewhere, somehow. And since this is a slower moving train, this bill, a lot of opportunities to nitpick, to criticize, to twist and distort, to rail on one hand and then beg for their own little earmark on the other. It's going to be a complicated process.
And fun to watch, and we'll have a front row seat. But Bill, I appreciate the time. As always, fun talking with you, my friend.
You too. Talk to you soon.
Good stuff. Bill Scher, contributing editor there at Politico Magazine. Make sure you check out his work at BillScherMedia.com. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. That was the day that 25 delegates from 17 cities gathered in Washington, D.C. to discuss forming a union for laborers. General laborers, who often perform some of the most backbreaking work on projects like digging canals and surfacing streets, were often blocked from joining craft unions as full members. The laborers in D.C. decided it was time to join together and formed the International Hod Carriers and Building Laborers Union. That was the beginning of the union that today is called the Laborers International Union of North America, or LIUNA. The union published its first constitution in English, German, and Italian, reflecting the diversity of the members that they represented. At the convention, the delegates issued a declaration of principles. In it, they declared, quote, "We hold that all men are created free and equal, and that honor and merit makes the man, and that self-preservation is the first law of nature, and that he who would be free must strike the first blow. They then went on to describe their purpose, writing, quote, "First, to gather under one grand banner all of those who toil on buildings with our craft and calling. Second, to promote by all honorable means the social and financial standing of all those who wish to partake in the fruits of amalgamation. Third, to create general agitation for the purpose of making a universal 8-hour day to increase the wages of members of the craft. Fourth, to establish a system of conciliation and arbitration in different sections of our land. Fifth, to help members of the craft in securing lawful and profitable employment. For more than a century, LIUNA has fought for the rights of laborers."
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Nancy Pelosi has invited the president to address a joint session of Congress for the first time on April 28th. I find April 28th an interesting day. That is Workers' Memorial Day. And this would really be a great opportunity for Joe Biden to talk about the people who fought, bled, and died for the things that we take for granted on the job. You know, things like the 8-hour work day and the battles it took to get an 8-hour work day or a 40-hour work week, overtime pay, the fact that we get weekends that didn't happen in the past. And you go through all of the accomplishments that labor and workers through their unions have fought for over the last 100 years. And it's something that, you know, people today we're never exposed to. You know, earlier we talked with Trae Crowder, the comedian, the liberal redneck comedian, about the Battle of Blair Mountain, where the term redneck came from. And it came from the fact that the coal miners, 10,000 of them were on strike, and the coal companies brought in, all these gun thugs and literally were dropping bombs on these striking workers who wore a red bandana around their neck because it was how they kept they were wearing a mask in the mines to keep from breathing in all the crap that's down there. And a number of them were killed and were left along the roadside. And it rained, and the ink from the bandana ran around, made their necks red. And that's where the term redneck came from. It was it was an honorary term for a while. And like he said, there's no reclaiming that for the good. But it's that history that we've never been taught. It's been scrubbed. And back in 2013, we actually did a labor history tour across the country. To find places like Blair Mountain, where I'll tell you, there were 10,000 striking miners, back in 1921, I believe it was. You can't tell that there were 5 people that walked around those parts. They literally not only abandoned the area, they took brick by brick every building that was left there, and it looks like you just were dropped in the woods. And that's what corporate America has done to labor's history over the last 40 years. And we found that in place after place where we went to these places where these horrible strikes, these horrible wars happened. Where companies were hiring Pinkertons and hiring armed thugs to beat up and shoot people and to hang labor organizers. That's our history. And I hope Joe Biden takes that opportunity to say, look, you look at what happened at Amazon. This is a moment where we have seen how horrible the working conditions are. These are sweatshops. We have seen how bad things are. We have policy that we can move to make people's lives better. We have seen right in front of us how difficult it is for people to join and form a union. Whereas my grandparents' generation, it was not this difficult. You got 50 plus one of the people signing a card. You went to the boss, you began negotiating. And if there was an election, it was done quickly. There wasn't all of this intimidation. There wasn't all of this harassment. Since Reagan forward, you have seen an employer class who is hell-bent on they will not relinquish control. They will not bargain. They will not waver. And they'll do anything, including break the law, to make sure that their control and their power is not questioned. As I've said, there are no benevolent corporations. There's some good ones, but no benevolent ones. Nothing that we have was given without a fight. And I hope Biden on Workers' Memorial Day remembers some of those folks who did fight the wars, who did fight the coal battles, who did fight the steel battles. It would be a fitting time, I think. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.